28:18 says, "And Jesus came and said to them, All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age." Hi, I'm Bobby, the pastor of Lighthouse Church and Online Ministry. One of the things that we as a church talk a lot about is going out and making disciples. And we do that a lot because, one, as we read, this was the last commandment or last command that Jesus gave his followers, us, before he ascended into heaven. And so, if this is the last command he gave his believers, you understand that this has to be important. The second reason why it's so important is because the modern church really isn't making disciples anymore. You know, there was a study that saw that 3 out of 10 believers, 3 out of 10 Christians are actively making disciples. And when you look at that, you can also look at it this way. Only out of 3 people, or 3 out of 10 people, are actively being discipled and are actively discipling someone. So many times when we look at Matthew 28:18 through 20, we read it as, go out and tell people about Jesus. Go out and evangelize. And don't get me wrong, evangelism is important. Evangelism is a necessary thing that all believers should do. But evangelism is just the first step. Once they give their life to Christ, then you need to disciple them. And so in this video, I want to talk about people who in my life have discipled me. There's 4 people I want to talk about. And then I want to talk about how we can disciple people. Just active ways we can disciple people. And listen, this is not a broad brush. This is, what works for you, works for you. But the main thing is we do need to, first of all, have someone disciple us actively. But secondly, we need to be discipling others. Before I get to, kind of the testimonial part of it, I do want to say this. No matter if you've been a Christian for 7 days or 70 years, you should still be actively discipled by someone. Being discipled is important. And I truly believe that God will put different disciplers in your life depending on where you're at in your relationship. So let me talk about 4 people who have discipled me in my life. And there's probably more people than just these 4, but these are the 4 that really stand out to me. The first person who really actively discipled me was a guy by the name of Nolan. When I was in middle school into high school, I lived at a dude ranch. And the dude ranch was up in the mountains of Colorado, but they had a very close-knit community. And so even at that time, I knew that I wanted to be a pastor, but I was dyslexic. I am dyslexic. And so even at that time, I was going into my freshman year, I had a 3rd grade reading level. I did not read. It was hard for me. And so even though I knew I wanted to be a pastor, I never really opened my Bible. And again, part of the reasons was because I couldn't read it. But that's when Nolan came in. Nolan started working out with me. Like I said, this was summer before my freshman year. And so I was going into football that year. And so Nolan started working out, running with me, and just being there with me. And so when we first started doing it, I thought we were just going to work out. And so we ran a couple miles, and then we sat on his truck bed, and he gave me a Bible and had me open it and had me started reading. And that meant a lot to me. This discipleship from Nolan was not a long-term thing. It really only lasted a couple months, maybe a year. But what it did was really got me into the Bible. Like I said, depending on, your maturity level, where you're at in your relationship, God will send different people to disciple you at that time. And at that time, I needed Nolan because he got me into the Word. He showed me that discipleship was a relationship. It wasn't something you had to do. It was something you got to do. And it was just building a relationship with someone. But even in that relationship, God was still the focus. It meant so much to me that he had me read the Bible. He didn't read the Bible to me. He made me open the Bible and read. At that time, we were reading Psalms, but he made me read Psalms. And it got me to get in there and really start reading for myself. At this time, we were going to a church, and I had this pastor, and nothing on him. He was busy, I know. But I had this pastor who I was begging to teach me how to be a pastor. And he just was always too busy. And now, when I look back, I see that the reason why he was too busy was because God had someone else to disciple me at that time. And so, like I said, what I learned from Nolan in terms of discipleship is meeting them where they're at, building a relationship, and getting them to read the Bible for themselves. So many times we go into church settings or, we listen to sermons and so on and so forth where they read the Bible to us. And, I listen to the auto Bible all the time. But I truly believe there is something in reading the Bible for yourself. The second person who really discipled me, and he's actively discipling me now, even now, is the youth pastor that, I went to as a youth, Pastor Brandon. And, Brandon is about 5 or 6 years older than me. And when Brandon came into my life, I was a senior in high school. I hadn't gone to youth group a lot before that. But my brother, actually, who's younger, actually started going to youth group before me. And then I slowly started going throughout my senior year. After my senior year, because of, my grades and test anxiety and dyslexia, I had to take a year off of college. And so I did. Brandon, during that time, he actively discipled me. He came to me and said, hey, let's meet once a week and let's get into the Word, and let's learn about being a Jesus follower. Let's learn about being a pastor. And at that time, that's what I needed. I was going through a hard, dark time. All my friends were going out of college. I was left home. And there was part of me that felt like I wasn't good. Felt that I wasn't smart enough. And Brendan saw that. And he loved on me. He, like I said, he discipled me. During this time, we read 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus, which talks about being a pastor. But more than that, Brandon showed me what it meant to be a young Christian man in a life filled with lust and flesh and stuff like that. And that's what I needed at that time. He opened the door to what it meant to be a true pastor, but he also opened the door what it meant to be a young Christian man. And more than that, he was a young Christian man himself. And so we were walking through that life together. And so that's what through Brandon, what God showed me about discipleship is, again, getting them into the Word, but teaching them, walking alongside them. So many times when we look at disciples, or people we're discipling, or so on or so forth, we think that this discipler is farther along or a lot better than the person they're discipling. And that's not the truth. True biblical, authentic biblical discipleship is walking side by side with the person you're discipling, or walking side by side with the person who's discipling you. Teaching them the things they need to know. Like I said, I was going into college that next year, and for Christians who go into college, even a Christian college, a lot of people lose their faith. And having Brandon disciple me during that time, I really truly believe that God used that to anchor me to God and anchor me to being a true discipler or disciple of Christ. The third person who discipled me was Brandon's dad, Pastor Mickey. And so Pastor Mickey really discipled me in a different way. I mean, we sat down, we would meet, but we weren't meeting regularly like Brandon and Nolan. He was always kosher to me. He would always talk to me and stuff like that. But the way I was discipled by Mickey was seeing how he walked, seeing how he was a pastor, seeing the things he did. And so me watching him taught me, or God used to teach me how to truly be a pastor. It showed me that a pastor is not afraid of plunging the toilet if they need to. A pastor isn't afraid of fixing the water sprinkler if he needs to. A pastor is not afraid to get down and dirty and do the things that God has called him to do. And Mickey showed me that, or God showed me that through Mickey. Another thing God used Mickey to is, even now, I mean, this is for all three of them. But even now, if I'm in trouble and I need talk, Mickey is always available. Mickey showed me that no matter whenever I need support, he will be there and be there for me. And we as believers, we as disciple makers should do the same thing. Now, do we need to have boundaries? Yes. And Mickey showed me that as well. We need to have boundaries. But we also need to, if we need to loosen those boundaries so that someone can get closer to Christ, or because someone's in crisis, then we need to do that. The fourth person who discipled me, and this is going to sound cheesy, but it's important, is Jesus Christ. We need to understand that Jesus is actively discipling us even now. We have Jesus' word. We have prayer. But Jesus is still actively discipling us. And so we need to understand that. We need to understand that we need to be open and understanding that Jesus is actively discipling us. He is probably the most important discipler we have. And so we need to spend time with that. And so those are the four people in my life that is actively discipling me. So how do we disciple? And I just quickly want to run down a couple ways. Again, this isn't a broad brush. This might not be for everyone, but the simplest way is this. Meet people where they're at. Walk alongside people side by side. Be there when people are in crisis. Get people to open the Word and read the Bible for themselves. And just be available. So how do you do that in this chaotic world? You go to church, meet people, new believers at church. You start talking to people at the store, start talking to people at your work, start talking to people just outside. And you just, you allow God to use you in mighty ways. And if you do that, God will draw people to you or to himself through you. And so you're just open for that. The most important thing is this. We need to be discipled actively, and we need to disciple someone actively. So I encourage you, if you don't have someone who's discipling you, find someone. And if you're not discipling someone actively, find someone. The key term for today is find someone. Thank you.